Dan Bilzerian, with over 30 million Instagram followers, lives a life of jaw-dropping luxury. His outrageous displays of wealth, women, and wild parties have earned him the title King of Instagram. Known for flaunting his opulence, Dan's lifestyle surpasses even that of the famously wealthy Wang Xikong, the nation's husband. Every post reflects his carefully crafted image of limitless wealth, blending reality and extravagance into a spectacle of indulgence. His social media presence is a modern-day fantasy, embodying power, confidence, and excess in every frame. A lavish persona with a questionable past. Dan Bilzerian, a man who's made a name for himself online, often claims he was once a Navy SEAL, and his home reportedly boasts enough weapons to outfit an entire army. But that's not all. Dan doesn't shy away from bragging about his high-stakes poker games, even calling himself the Warren Buffett of poker. One time, he boasted about winning $10.8 million in a single night. His life is a whirlwind of beautiful women, high-end guns, over-the-top parties, and endless luxury. It's rare to see him without gorgeous women surrounding him, whether he's eating, chilling, or throwing one of his legendary parties. His Instagram is a highlight reel of fast cars, private jets, and yachts, making it nearly impossible for people to look away. Yet, while it's all incredibly mesmerizing, many can't help but wonder, how real is it? Some admire him for living what seems like the ultimate dream, but others are more skeptical. A lot of people raise their eyebrows when Dan talks about his Navy SEAL background, especially since he never officially became one. He did go through parts of the training, but disciplinary issues got him kicked out before he could complete it. So, this military hero image he likes to project? It's a bit overhyped, but honestly, the controversy just adds to his larger-than-life persona. Unveiling the Playboy lifestyle. If you've ever scrolled through Dan's Instagram feed, you know it's like stepping into another world. But who is the real Dan Bilzerian? Where does all that money come from? To get to the heart of it, we need to go all the way back to 1980, when Dan was born into serious wealth. His rise to fame isn't just about living a luxury life. It's about branding himself as the guy who's cracked the code to the perfect life. From being a little-known poker player to becoming a social media icon, Dan's journey is really a story of how fame, wealth, and personal branding collide in today's world of Instagram and social media influencers. He's turned his life into a product that people can't stop consuming. But the real question is, what's beneath the surface? Early life born into wealth. Dan Bilzerian entered the world on December 7, 1980, in Tampa, Florida, into a family that already knew the taste of immense wealth. His parents, Paul Bilzerian and Terry Stephan, had built a substantial fortune long before Dan was born. Growing up in one of the most luxurious mansions in Tampa Bay, Dan's childhood home was nothing short of a palace, with its 10 bedrooms, 13 bathrooms, a pool, basketball court, and even a lakeside castle. The estate was so grand that it rivaled some of the world's most famous residences, like Buckingham Palace. This environment of grandeur and privilege shaped Dan's understanding of life, giving him a sense of entitlement and a deep craving for luxury. It also provided him with the kind of financial cushion most people can only dream of, allowing him to chase his wildest desires without ever worrying about money. Dan's father, Paul Bilzerian, was a corporate raider during the 1980s, making millions through aggressive business takeovers. However, his career was marred by legal troubles that would eventually cast a shadow over the family. Despite these setbacks, the wealth Paul accumulated ensured Dan had a financial safety net, even as controversy lingered over how that wealth was acquired. A childhood of privilege and excess. Growing up alongside his younger brother Adam, Dan lived the kind of life many can only imagine. From a young age, his interests stood out. He was fascinated by poker and guns. By the time he was just 6 years old, Dan owned his first real gun. Not a water pistol or a toy, but a legitimate firearm. This love for guns would become a lifelong passion, shaping much of his adult identity. His world was filled with extravagant toys, luxury cars, private jets, and the kind of freedom that comes with immense wealth. His childhood was one marked by lavish vacations, top-tier private schooling, and access to anything his heart desired. But even with all the privilege, Dan had a rebellious side that would come to define much of his later life. Meanwhile, his younger brother Adam took a quieter route, enjoying the same luxuries but choosing to stay out of the spotlight. Unlike Dan, Adam focused more on his passion for poker and private investments. Although they walked different paths, the brothers remained close, bound by their shared experience of living in a world where money was never a concern. The Navy SEAL dream cut short. At just 19, Dan Bilzerian was physically in top shape and ready to take on the challenge of joining the U.S. Navy. He even made it through parts of the intense Navy SEAL training, which many consider one of the toughest programs in the military. However, fate had other plans. Dan broke his leg during training, and to make matters worse, he was later discharged due to disciplinary issues. This marked the end of his military aspirations, but opened the door to a different path. After leaving the Navy, Dan decided to enroll at the University of Florida, majoring in business and criminology. But let's just say that academics weren't exactly his priority. His attention was more on poker and guns than textbooks, and it wasn't long before his rebellious side surfaced. Dan was caught with a gun in his car on campus, and eventually expelled from the university. This moment marked a turning point, where the dream of a military career was left behind, and Dan began diving headfirst into the high-stakes world of poker and gambling. Although Dan often looks back on his brief time in the Navy as a period that built his mental toughness, many critics argue that he exaggerates his military background to craft an image of danger and risk. Even though he never officially became a Navy SEAL, Dan often leans into this aura, donning tactical gear and referencing his training to reinforce his larger-than-life persona. Poker, the rise of a high-stakes player. After leaving the Navy and university, Dan's focus shifted entirely to poker. He was drawn to Texas Hold'em, the style of poker you often see in the movies, fast-paced, strategic, and requiring a sharp mind. At first, though, Dan wasn't exactly winning big. In fact, he lost more than he won. Desperate to keep up with the high-stakes games, Dan sold 3 of his most expensive guns and scraped together $10,000 to gamble with. That money turned out to be his ticket to the big leagues. Dan took to the seas on a casino cruise and, despite some early losses, experienced a sudden improvement in his poker skills. He turned a $750 buy-in into $187,000 during one tournament, marking his arrival as a serious player in the poker world. From there, Dan's strategic thinking and competitive nature helped him climb the ranks of professional poker players. But as his reputation grew, so did the controversy. Many people doubted the legitimacy of his wins, suspecting that some of his poker success might be more about image than skill. Dan became known for hosting extravagant, high-stakes poker nights, where wealthy players would throw down enormous sums of money. These private games, often surrounded by secrecy, fueled rumors that Dan's winnings might be part of a carefully constructed image rather than genuine poker prowess. Regardless, his love for the game and his flashy lifestyle intertwined, turning him into a poker celebrity. The glamour of poker and the rise of fame. Dan Bilzerian's fame wasn't just about poker, it was the extravagant lifestyle he built around it. Though his younger brother Adam also played professionally, Dan's over-the-top persona quickly made him more famous. Stories of his supposed poker winnings, ranging from hundreds of thousands to millions, began circulating. Yet, many doubted these claims since few had ever seen him play in person. What really set Dan apart was his carefully curated social media image. His Instagram became the centerpiece of his brand, showcasing a life of yachts, private jets, and parties with models. He offered his millions of followers a glimpse into an unattainable fantasy world, one where wealth and luxury seemed endless. Poker was part of the story, but Dan was selling a dream of invincibility and excess. The World Series of Poker and growing skepticism. In 2008, Dan participated in the prestigious World Series of Poker, finishing 180th and winning just over $36,000. It wasn't a huge win, but it got him attention in the poker world. By 2010, Bluff magazine named him the most interesting poker player in the world. However, as Dan's claims of big poker wins grew, so did the skepticism. With so few eyewitnesses to his poker success, many began to wonder if his wealth really came from poker, or if family money and other undisclosed sources were in play. Despite the doubts, Dan used this controversy to fuel his fame. Whether people believed his poker stories or not, he had successfully turned himself into a brand, a man who blurred the lines between reality and the fantasy he projected online. The lavish lifestyle, women, cars, and guns. As Dan Bilzerian's fame skyrocketed, so did the extravagance of his lifestyle. His Instagram became a showcase of scantily clad women, luxury cars, and an arsenal of high-powered weapons. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Rolls-Royces. Dan had them all, and he loved showing them off. But his wealth didn't stop at cars. He owned a private jet, frequently packed with models, and hosted wild parties on his luxury yacht. This combination of women, guns, and excess became his brand, offering his millions of followers a glimpse into a fantasy life most can only dream of. He also embraced extreme sports and dangerous hobbies, from driving tanks to blowing up cars and even organizing helicopter jumps. These adrenaline-fueled activities helped cement his image as a fearless risk-taker who thrived on living life on the edge. Living large, but questions arise. With such an extravagant lifestyle, many began to question the true source of Dan's wealth. Was it really all from poker, or were there hidden sources of income? Dan's father, Paul Bilzerian, had been a businessman convicted of securities fraud in the 1980s. This led to speculation that Dan's fortune might be part of his father's legacy, hidden in trust funds to avoid legal consequences. While Dan insisted his wealth came from poker, reports suggested otherwise. Critics pointed to the possibility that much of his fortune was protected through family trust funds, casting doubt on the self-made image Dan worked so hard to build. The lingering questions about his finances only added to the controversy and intrigue surrounding his life, leaving many unsure of where the myth ended and reality began. The legal troubles of Paul Bilzerian. Paul Bilzerian was a successful businessman in real estate and corporate takeovers, accumulating millions. However, in 1989, he was convicted of insider trading and sentenced to 5 years in prison, along with a $1.5 million fine. After serving just 1 year, Paul filed for bankruptcy, claiming he couldn't repay the $62 million the SEC demanded. Many believe he transferred much of his wealth into trusts for his sons, Dan and Adam, to shield it from creditors. This foundation of hidden wealth likely helped fuel Dan's later success, allowing him to live lavishly without facing the financial scrutiny that burdened his father. Controversies and media scrutiny. Despite constant questions about his wealth, Dan's lifestyle became a magnet for media attention. In 2013, he claimed to have won $10.8 million in a single poker game, though no one verified it. The following year, he faced lawsuits, including one where he allegedly kicked a model at a Miami nightclub. These incidents only added to his fame. The more trouble Dan got into, the more his followers admired him, as every controversy turned into free publicity for his brand. In 2014, he was charged with possession of explosives after blowing up a tractor at one of his infamous parties. Though he walked away with just a fine, it cemented his image as someone who played by his own rules, pushing boundaries without fear of the consequences. From social media star to CEO. In 2017, Dan launched Ignite, a company selling cannabis, e-cigarettes, and alcohol. With Canada's cannabis legalization in 2018, Ignite's headquarters moved to Toronto, and by 2019, the company went public. Despite Dan's popularity, Ignite struggled financially, reporting major losses. Critics accused him of using company funds to support his extravagant lifestyle, raising more doubts about his business skills. Ignite's falling stock prices only worsened the situation, leading to legal troubles and accusations from former employees of misused corporate money. Dan defended himself by saying his personal brand was being used to promote Ignite, hoping the strategy would eventually succeed. The real Dan Bilzerian, fame or fortune? Today, Dan's estimated net worth stands at around $200 million. While many admire him, others question whether his fortune is truly self-made or inherited from family wealth. Regardless, Dan remains a social media sensation, known for living a life of excess and controversy. His story brings up important questions about how social media influences public perception. Can wealth and fame be manufactured by simply curating the right image? Whether Dan's wealth came from poker or family money, he has successfully transformed his life into a brand, one that thrives on controversy, extreme luxury, and a lifestyle that leaves most people wondering what's real and what's not.